Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping yet again into a beer from a brewer. I have never had any of their beers before. So this comes out of Lincoln, Nebraska. The brewer is Zipline Brewing Company, and the beer is called the Stout. It's an Imperial Stout that's been bourbon barrel aged. It clocks in at a huge 13.8% ABV. So, label art on this, rather clean design. Just has clearly a zip line. Not sure the significance of the name, but nonetheless, that's what's on the label. Not much else to talk about there. This is just a 12-ounce bottle. So we're going to get this cracked. We're using our nice all-purpose Sam Adams glass. So let's get this poured in. Ooh, very, very dark, very thick. Let me get a bit more aggressive with the pour there. Give it a chance to form a head. It's quite thick. Not sure how well it's going to do. Actually, I end up doing a pretty decent head there. Okay, great. Wonderful, wonderful. So I can say, anybody names their stout the Stout, I've got high hopes. I mean, that's a pretty big, naming convention, flex of the muscles there. Oh, our stout? Yeah, that's the Stout. It is the Stout. So it sounds awesome. I like it. Big, bold naming. Let's take our visual cue. It is absolutely pitch black as expected. I cannot see at all. Oh, no, just a tiny, tiny, tiny. It looks very thick pouring. I can see super fine carbonation coming up in a super slow bead. So yes, it's as thick as it looked as I was pouring it. There were already very big aromas coming off of this as well. It did form a pretty nice, rich, creamy head there on top. Looks fantastic. Let's get over this for a full sniff. Oh yeah. Yeah, that smells great. So really on this, I'm getting a little bit of the underpinning from the roast on the malt, but it is absolutely dominated by the bourbon barrel. It smells fantastic. I'm getting a lot of notes of vanilla and molasses and kind of caramelized sugar off of the barrels, and then this underpinning of roast. It's giving suggestions. It's not creeping through to the forefront. It's really driven by that barrel. But it looks fantastic and it smells fantastic. The head is still holding true. So let's just jump right in, see what the Stout is all about. Ooh, yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, it gets bigger. It gets bigger and bigger as it goes on. Oh, that's huge and hugely delicious. A lot of layering here. A lot of big, bold flavors. There's a lot of ebbing and flowing and pockets opening up as it goes ever longer and longer and longer. So before we even get into the flavor profile, let's talk weight. Let's talk mouthfeel. The mouthfeel on this is unbelievably resistant. It looked very thick as I was pouring it, and it absolutely feels every bit that thick. You can really feel just how resistant it is when you move across the palate, and it really coats the palate extremely well. This isn't one of those that feels creamy, silky, foamy. It doesn't start to bubble up at all. You can just feel the inherent thickness that the beer has. Now, weight-wise, on the swallow, it does feel like it's robust, but it doesn't feel as heavy as the mouthfeel feels thick. I would say maybe medium heavy. I would expect a 13.8% stout that feels that thick on the mouthfeel to have a very, very heavy body. It doesn't. It's really just medium heavy, but a very thick, resistant, viscous body. In terms of the flavors, what happens here? Very first thing right up front, you are met immediately with that bourbon. That is front and center, so that really matches exactly what I got in the aroma profile. And it's very classic bourbon underpinnings. You get a little slight suggestion of a booziness that's gone almost immediately. This is not one of these barrel-aged high ABV beers I would term boozy at all. And also, as I was getting kind of caramelized sugar and molasses and vanilla undercurrents from the bourbon barrel on the nose, that's coming through in the flavor profile. All of those characteristic traits. Vanilla, molasses, and caramelized sugar. A lot of them. And it takes about 5, 6, 7 seconds. And when the intensity of the bourbon barrel dials back just a little bit, that's when the undercurrents of this big, very roasty malt bill start to open up and it's very rich. It's very roasty. It's not one of those that puts me in mind of, say, like a French or Italian roast coffee bean where it's on the edge of being burned. Nothing like that, but it's very deep. It's very roasty. There's underpinnings of this kind of cocoa and chocolatey vibe to it. There is a little bit of a coffee-like vibe to it as well, but it would be akin to, say, like a medium roast house blend kind of thing. But it's very nice. It's clearly very roasty, and it pairs absolutely wonderfully with the barrel selection. I don't know what barrel they used. I don't know, how long it was left in the barrel, but what I do know is it's a very well put together, very dark, very roasty, and very flavorful beer. This is a good one. So, it's not quite as heavy as I expected, but the mouthfeel is every bit as I expected, that very much matched the visual cue I got as I was pouring it. And the head, it settled down a little bit, but it's still holding quite nicely. A really nice creamy pad still floating on most of the top. And I gotta say, in terms of a pull no punches stout, this is one of those that's just extremely well executed. It's not really trying to go over the top, reinvent the wheel here. We've just got a high ABV, bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Stout that seems to be, at least on first sip, executed extremely well. So I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to let everything re-intensify, make sure I didn't miss anything else. We're going to talk about the balance, and we're going to talk about the finish. On first sip, this is an excellent stout. So take two. Yeah, the mouthfeel on the body, again, I nailed it on first sip. And there it goes. There's that bourbon. You're getting a lot of molasses, that slight booziness that goes almost immediately away. A lot of big vanilla coming out of this. Caramelized sugar, a lot of caramelized dark brown sugar. Then, 5, 6, 7 seconds in, that underpinning of the malt bill starts to open. It's very roasty. It hits you first with roast, then it hits you with coffee, and then it hits you with chocolate cacao, and it's just completely blending and moving in and out of all the undercurrents of the bourbon barrel aging notes. And it's really nice how the flavors just interplay. It really is just like a constantly undulating wave of flavors here. Sometimes you're getting pockets of roast mixing with caramelized dark brown sugar. Then sometimes you're getting coffee mixing with vanilla, and it just keeps moving in and out. Very, very nice. In terms of the balance of this, I would say it's perfect. There's nothing I would change about it. Whatever barrel they used, however long they left it in there, it's fantastic. It does its job both in terms of what it brings to the table in the aroma department as well as the flavor department. And in terms of the malt selection, absolutely top notch. It's very, very dark roasty malts that pair beautifully and can stand up to this big barrel presence. Now, let's talk about the finish. You may expect that on a 13.8% ABV barrel-aged Imperial Stout, that the finish would be significantly longer than your average beer. And even so for the style. And yes, if that's where you were thinking, you would be 100% correct. This is a much longer than average finish. And really on this one, it's the barrel that does the lead. I would say it's 85% lingering barrel to about 15% lingering underpinning of roasty malt. And this is not one that, yes, it's got a lot of deep, rich roasted malts, but it's not one that's leading with a lot of roasty bitters. So the length on this one is really just coming to how big and bold the flavor profile is in tandem with the intensity of that barrel that's really lingering. A little bit of the underlying malt, but once we hit about the minute mark, most of the malt linger on the back of the finish is gone, and it's driven completely by that barrel, but it's still very, very clear, lingering bourbon, and it's got just the slightest subtle hints of that underpinning of roast. It's hard to pick out, but you can really clearly get the bourbon. I would say it's easily a minute and a half on the end of each sip, so well above average. This is top tier. And yeah, I did expect it. It's a big, bold beer, and it's pushing 14%. So, the stout, is it worthy of the name? For my money, yes. I absolutely love it. This is an extremely well done bourbon barrel-aged stout. It's not trying to reinvent what it is. It's just executing it extremely well. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, call it my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Zipline Brewing Company's The Stout, an Imperial Stout that's been bourbon barrel aged, clocking in at a massive 13.8% ABV. Zipline Brewing is based in Lincoln, Nebraska. So this was a really big beer, a very, very well done barrel aged stout, and we're just going to go through all of the scores from the top. So starting with the aroma, this was one of those that was really, really huge. You could get the bourbon barrel and all of its subtleties right out of the gate. The underpinning of the malt bill wasn't quite as prevalent, but it smelled very nice. It was very pungent. I did give the aroma a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste, in general, I thought the taste was exceptional. It was very, very well balanced. Really, for me, on this, I would have just liked a bit more impetus from the underlying roasty malt bill. It was absolutely driven by the bourbon barrel aging, and make no bones about it, it absolutely tasted fantastic. Tons of complexity, tons of layering. Just personally, I would have liked a little more of that malt bill to come through as well to balance with the barrel aging, but I only docked 1 point. The taste gets a 9 out of 10. For the body on this was above average, but it did surprise me because this was nearly a 14% ABV beer. It was really just medium heavy, which in this ABV range, yeah, I'm kind of being kind calling it above average. That's maybe really just the high end of average range. But nonetheless, I stuck with my initial ranking and I gave it a 7 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this was quite a bit different story to the body. It was just hugely resistant, hugely viscous. It didn't get creamy or silky or foamy or anything like that. But you could really feel just how thick, viscous, and resistant the mouthfeel was, which I did expect on a nearly 14% stout. Mouthfeel does get a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was exceptionally long, and it was absolutely driven by the barrel. Well in excess of a minute and a half, lingering on the back of the sip. Surprisingly in there, even though I was craving in the flavor profile a bit more in-your-face forward nature from the underlying malt bill, on the back end of the finish, it was still present until right around the minute mark, and then the final kind of 30 seconds was all barrel. But very nice finish indeed, well above average to finish, does get a 10 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did a very good job, well above average. It poured a nice, creamy, foamy head. It stuck around pretty well most of the time. It settled a little bit quicker than I was hoping, but it did still keep a nice, creamy, foamy, thick pad floating on top for almost the entire time I was drinking on the beer. I only docked 1 point here. The head and retention gets a 9 out of 10. For the appearance, it was absolutely pitch black as expected. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance, I alluded to this when talking about the malt bill in the flavor side of the equation. And yeah, I in general thought that it was above average. I mean, it's a big barrel-aged Imperial Stout. There's not that much you can really do for the tweaking, but maybe just, it's already pushing 14%, so you can't say it's a lacking malts. Maybe just dial back the amount of time in the barrel to let the malt speak, or maybe tweak some of the malts that you have in there. Maybe add some additional hops to help kind of push out some of the underlying roasty characteristics. I don't really know, but I felt like I would have preferred just a little bit of a tweak there, a little more of the underlying malt bill to come through. But again, nitpicky, the balance was above average. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Filling in the intangibles, subjectively, very, very good beer, well above average. Had a few little things I would have tweaked. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Finally, is an example of the style. So, this is a crowded marketplace in this category. This was indeed a very well done barrel-aged Imperial Stout, but it did lose some points in a few key categories. In the grand scheme, I did think that it was a very well represented, very well done beer for this style. I only docked 1 point overall. Example of the style, I give a 9 out of 10, which does bring the total score on Zipline Brewing Company's The Stout to an 89 out of 100. So yeah, absolutely well above average, guys. Barrel-aged stouts, Imperials, they're all over the place. There's a lot of competition. To really hit the top tier, you've got to be at the top of the game. This was a very, very good beer. I would put in that cluster at the top of the game. They called it The Stout. Yeah, I mean, sure, why not? It is the stout. It did lose some points in a few categories, nothing too big, but this was a very, very well done stout. My personal preferences aside, and little balance tweaks that I would have liked to help make it just a little more even parity between all the aspects. That's really being nitpicky, but it is what it is. It's a fantastic stout. If you like big, bold, in-your-face, barrel-aged stouts, this is one I could absolutely recommend. And I got this one from Tavour, so keep your eyes out. If they bring one up again, you might want to add it to your list. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.